This is a 48 megapixel digital camera. I received this from the Amazon Blind Voice Review program to review for free. It would cost you $50 if you wanted to buy it. They have not paid me for my review, and my opinions are my own. So in the box you get a small synthetic carry bag, a microfiber cleaning cloth, a wrist strap, a USB-A to USB-C cable, a user's manual, and the camera itself. This is a small digital camera, and it was marketed for teens, seniors, and kids, so basically people who do not have or don't know how to use a smartphone camera. Alright, reading the manual and looking at the menus in the camera, it appears to support up to 58 megapixel. This camera has a digital lens, by which they mean it does a digital zoom. And so it looks to have a relatively easy to use user interface here. There's various buttons, so you have the telephoto, which will zoom in, the wide, which zooms out. That is all a digital zoom. The only mechanical change in this lens is the macro mode here. So there's a little slider, you flip it up and you're in macro mode. And when you're in macro mode, it'll do a better job at focusing at things that are close by. So I'm going to focus and take a picture of the user's manual here close up. And then I'm going to take it out of macro mode and take a picture of the user's manual from the same distance, and you can see the difference there. So it's kind of nice that it has the macro mode if you want to take a picture of a flower or something close up, but otherwise you just leave that out there. Has a little selfie mirror on the front, so if you get your face centered in that mirror, it basically means it's centered in the viewfinder, so that's kind of nice. Has a little flash in here. So there's a lot of icons on the bottom. For the most part, you can just use normal, okay, regular, auto mode. If you push the menu button, it pops up with the various things you can do, and by default it's in auto mode. They have modes for night and portrait and landscape and backlight and so forth. If you push left and right, you can change the resolution. So by default it's 48 megapixels, 8000 by 6000, and you can go down. It also has a 58 megapixel, which is 8784. I don't know why that's not the default. So basically the default here is 48 megapixels. They have a beauty face, which I'm assuming is a facial filter. They have the shooting, you can do single or continuous. They have the self-timer, which can be various times. They have an exposure compensation. They have a white balance, which you can just leave it auto. And then they have the quality, which is set by default to fine, but if you go up to super fine, will store at a better JPEG encoding. They also have sharpness. We have sharp, normal, and soft. They have saturation, high, normal, low. And then there's an effect. And the effect, you probably want to keep it in normal effect. That's basically filters. This button down here will also cycle through the effects. So you want to at least look at this icon. It's kind of a star with a line and a little person, and that's the normal effect. And if you start pushing this guy, you get various other effects. And if you want to know what this icon means, you can go into the menu and actually see the name for these. So there's normal, black and white, sepia, red, green, blue, sunset, warm, cool, overexposure, IR, binary, vivid, undertone, dog eye. So there are lots of different effects here. And for the most part, normal is probably what you want. But if you're giving this to a kid, you can expect to get a lot of pictures with various filter effects on. So in addition to the effect, you can do auto ISO or pick your ISO. You have anti-shake is on by default, which is probably a good thing to leave on. There's a face detect, which is off by default. There's capture smile, which is off by default. And then there's some settings. You can pick the language, you can set the date, you can pick whether or not date and time stamps are put on the pictures that it takes. There's also, you can turn the beep or change the frequency. Here it's 60 hertz, so 60 hertz lighting is what it compensates for. You can format the micro SD card, set everything back to factory defaults. So on your little icon here, you can adjust the flash by doing up, so you can have, no flash, auto flash, or always flash. And then on the right hand side here, that is the playback, so you can see various things that you've done so far. and you can hit the menu to delete particular things. There's also a lock option, which we will not use at this point. There's a trash button, so while you're looking at things, you can just go down and do the trash. And on the left side over here, well, let me get back to picture taking mode. Alright, so on the left side, there is a self timer, so 2, 5, 10. And so you can access many of these features in the menus here. So for example, the self timer was also in this menu here. But some of those menu items are quick accessed from within this thing here. So on the bottom you have a 1/4x20 tripod mount. You have the card and battery compartment. So the battery is user replaceable. It's just a little square lithium-ion battery. It says model BP8M. So I don't know, I'm assuming you can buy replacement BP8M batteries. They have 3 little marks here, and there is a picture about which way you should insert this, and it will go in either way, but it'll only work in one way. So you want to look in there, either follow the picture or look for the contacts and make sure these guys are closer to that little teal thing when you put that in. Now the micro SD card also goes in here, so this particular camera has in it this micro SD card, which is a 64 gigabyte class 10. Unbranded. Now when you insert that, the contacts are kind of facing up the same direction the screen is, so you might consider that upside down when you put that in. Wrist strap goes through here, and that is basically the features of this camera. So I'm going to go take a look at the pictures I've taken and the videos I've taken with this guy by plugging this in with the USB cable to my computer to download those. So when you plug this guy into your computer with the USB cable, it will charge by default, but it does not show up as a disk drive on your computer until you turn the power on. Once you turn the power on, then you can load files off of it through the USB cable. Alright, the data transfer speed here is about 8 megabytes per second. That's about the half of the fastest speed I've ever seen with my computer, so I believe that's being limited by the camera. So we're going to just say that this camera can transfer data across the USB-C cable at about 8 megabytes a second. Charging the battery is done via the USB-C port on the camera here. This works fine if you're using the provided USB-A to C cable. However, if you just plug in any old USB-C power delivery charger, the camera does not negotiate power delivery charging, and so you will not be able to charge this with just like your cell phone's power delivery charger. You have to use a specific USB-A to C cable that just takes 5 volts out to the USB-C port. So keep that in mind if you're packing chargers. Make sure you have the USB-A to C cable to charge this guy. Alright, after reviewing the video and images this guy shot, I'm relatively impressed. At this price point, you don't expect the images to be perfect, but they're pretty good at the full resolution. Now, when you go into the digital zoom, things get blurry, as you'd kind of expect with a digital zoom. So it's kind of useful if you really want to frame your picture as a zoomed picture and take the picture in the camera, but really you could just take a regular picture, take it onto your computer, and then use a photo editing program to crop down to the area you're interested in and get kind of the same results. I'm shooting an HD movie and I'm going to hit the telephoto button. So that is the digital telephoto on the HD movie. The video, I would say this is an HD camera. It can record at higher than that, but the frame rate below 30 frames per second, a 10 frame per second video really isn't very useful other than maybe as kind of a landscape scene. So I think, if you're going into this thinking, hey, it's an HD video camera, I think that's the way to think about this camera. It's pretty easy to use. The menus are pretty easy to figure out, even without reading the manual. I like the fact it has a user replaceable battery, so you could buy a replacement battery in a couple of years if your battery starts not holding a charge well. So I would have liked if the USB-C port could work with a power delivery charger, just because having to carry a USB-A to C cable around with you just to make sure you get the generic 5 volts going into that to charge it could be kind of annoying. They do provide a cable with the box though. I like the macro mode. The macro mode works really well. It's a nice option to have. I think if you're going to choose between a cheap zoom lens and the macro mode here, that kind of depends on what you're looking to do with the camera. But I can see, if you're giving this to a kid, they probably are going to be taking pictures of things up close, and so having that macro mode as a default, as an actual lens option could prove to be very useful there. So this is a budget camera. It provides pretty good value for this price point, I think.